A minor villainess no more by Mostri.
Chapter 1. Too many questions. She found herself back in bed again, with the mango pillows as a backrest. The same maid who dropped the food tray and ran out of the room is now sitting next to her, feeding her spoonfuls of a very soft, warm, and flavorless oat porridge. A maid and a butler were cleaning the floor, while another maid brushed her long hair away on the other side. Everything had settled down, and that allowed her to think about the events happening so far.
Her name was Seok Chae-won. Now, let's pay attention to the word was. Since the mental fog dissipated, she could think better and she came to realize that Jae-won was no more. The young Jae-won had just turned 14 and was walking to school to her second day of middle school. But that came to an abrupt end thanks to a drunk driver who was going so fast that when he hit her, most of her bones shattered, killing her on impact. Said shattering was so loud that she was able to hear it over the sound of broken glass and the screams of people. She shuddered at the memory. She had a quick death, sure, but that's still a really gruesome way to die. I mean, who wouldn't be a bit scarred? But she felt like she couldn't sit down and let that memory settle in, especially in the situation she's in. She looked up. She found herself in an unfamiliar situation. And worst part of it, she knew where she was. Or at least she thought so. Seok Chae-won was no more. Instead, now she was an entirely different person. Someone that she knew really well. My name is Larimar, correct? She geared the question to the multiple maids and butler in the room. At first, she expected some awkward gazes or that none of them would speak. Instead, she saw how their faces lighted up at the question. Finally, the maid feeding her spoke up. Yes, you're absolutely correct. Your name is Larimar, she said in a jolly tone, her expression showing some sense of pride. That was enough confirmation for her. So let's make this long story short. Seok Jae-won was an awkward 14-year-old Korean girl who loved rocks, making her way through school life as best as she could, until she met her demise in a gruesome accident with a possible drunk driver. But death didn't matter, because she was clearly alive and well, or as well as you can be when you wake up in the body of a person who has been in a coma for 4 years. Yes, Seok Chae-won was no more indeed. But that wasn't the case for Larimar. Larimár Saél de la costa Manglare Narciso. Now, who's Larimar? Well, that question is easy to answer. She was a minor villain in the controversial yet beloved Korean web novel, then turned into a webcomic, Crystal Heart! Exclamation part included. And it was one of Chae-won's favorite stories for a total of 3 years. So much so that she knew who Larimar is in detail, and how she was made irrelevant in the story. In Crystal Heart, Larimar was the protagonist's bully for a total of 4 years, since her and the protagonist were 9 up to when they were 11. Then the author decided one chapter that she suddenly fell down the stairs and broke her neck. Yes, it happened that abruptly, with no warnings or build-up. Not even a checkup's gun to lead people to believe that was gonna happen eventually. The shock was made worse thanks to them putting it on the first paragraph of the chapter, and then moving on from it like they just had described how sunny the day was. A lot of the fans were disappointed with Okiboki, the author. She still remembers how she felt reading that paragraph in her mom's cracked tablet. And let's not mention the comments at the end of the chapter. Okiboki started their first controversy with a paragraph. Some people have done it with less than that, but the description of Latimer's comatose body on the stairs was enough for the fans to start a riot. Most fans were angry because of how they wrote that paragraph, saying it was perverted the way Okiboki wrote that scene. Many others were upset because of how they ignored the potential of the character. And some were mad they did that specifically with one of the very few female characters in the story at the time. In short, it was a hot, flaming mess. But Okiboki kept going with the story.
seemingly ignoring all the criticism that came their way. Taiwan still remembered thinking, maybe the author has plans for Larimar, for later, she thought. She has to come back. She was making progress in the story and becoming nicer with the protagonist. Alas, that never happened. Taiwan became 14 and the story just ended, forgetting Larimar almost entirely. The more she thought about the situation, the more she curled up into herself, her frown becoming more visible by the second to the servants around her. Lady Larimar, are you alright? Asked the maid who was feeding her, still holding a spoonful of porridge in midair. Yes, I'm alright, says Chae-won, coming back to reality once more. I was just thinking. About? The maid asked, giving her another spoonful. For a moment, she tries to chew the porridge to give herself time to think, not thinking about how silly that is. I was thinking where I am. I'm not too sure how I ended up here. She tries to look confident with her reply, but she wasn't a 25-plus-year-old woman who reincarnated in the role of a villainess. She was just a 14-year-old girl who loved rocks and comics. And when everyone goes quiet and start looking at each other with worried faces, Taewon panics on the inside. Oh, my lady, said the maid feeding her. It's a miracle you can even remember your name. The other servants in the room nodded, but didn't say anything to add to the conversation. With a gentle clink of the spoon against the ceramic bowl, the maid finishes feeding Chae-won. How about we wait for the count? He will explain everything in time, the maid says, cutting the conversation short. Jae-won believes she understands what the maid is trying to do here. It's basically, it's not my place to tell you these things. Which wasn't wrong, but she also felt nervous about meeting the count. Sadly, she couldn't give herself more time to prepare about what's to come, as she hears the running steps of someone outside the house, soon followed by another pair of frantic steps. Sire, please, wait for me! The voice of an older gentleman could be heard outside the window, clearly gasping for air. Soon, the servants quickly finished what was left of their task, and moved to stand on the wall near the door, almost as if they knew how quickly their master would arrive once he was inside. Finally, from the hallway and into the door, a giant man comes inside the room, or rather, bolts inside. Surpassing the height of every adult in the room, standing by the door is none other than the infamous Count Gael Silt de la Costa Manglare Moscata, also known as Gale the Scourge. His fame lies in the fact that he almost single-handedly has kept the coastal line of the kingdom safe from local and foreign pirates and all sorts of unwanted invaders, all by the hand of a man who was gasping from air in the doorway, like he had ran all the way to this room. To some, the difference between father and daughter was stark. While his daughter had a height of 151 meters, Guile stood at an unbelievable 2 meters and 10 centimeters high. Not to mention the man has strong facial features, with a scar that ran from under his left eye all the way to his chest, exposing part of a canine and part of his premolars, making his face look like he was making a strange snarl. Meanwhile, his daughter's face was soft and round, despite her sickly body. But, despite those extreme differences, One could tell that the body of who she was inside of was indeed the daughter of the man standing in front of her. You must be my father, correct? She says, feeling nervous. The Count takes a second to compose himself. Despite his rough appearance, he showed signs of also being nervous. He puts a hand on his pocket and slowly pulls out an item from it. A seashell made out of brass. It was big, but looked small in his hand. Tawan watches as he places the conch over his Adam apple, and out from it the sound of a gentle voice graces her ears. Can you tell who I am? the voice asked her. It takes her a moment, fascinated by the apparatus being used in front of her. But she replies the question. But, well, I'd say the freckles are a dead giveaway. Freckles? The man's mouth opens agape, but no sound comes from it, only from the conch. Jaewon notices how strange that statement sounds. It's not just the freckles. We both have wavy hair and our skin color is similar. But you have freckles on your nose too, like I do. And I do remember you, partially. She gets embarrassed by his statement. She only showed him and everyone in the room that she had post-coma crazies. Can she even call it that? She just wanted the earth to split open and to jump into the core of the earth herself. But despite the awkward statement, everyone in the room looked and felt happy about her words. More so Count Gael, who made the tiniest smile. When the doctor finally arrives to the room, he is breathless, and his face is also red and sweaty. After a glass of cold water and a chair, both him and the Count took a seat next to Seok Chae-won, and the doctor began to check on her body, doing all the typical procedures, checking her throat, ears, blood pressure, heartbeat, and even the sound of her lungs. And finally, he asked her to look at her neck, checking the area and pressing on it. She stayed quiet for the most part, letting the doctor do his job. It's truly a miracle, he starts with, his hands now cleaning his glasses. How bad was it? Taiwan asked, touching the back of her neck nervously. The room falls silent again, but the doctor breaks it quickly with a cough. Count, I believe I should explain to her what's happened to her, the doctor says, looking at the Count for his approval. Gael nods, and with a hand gesture, he gives the doctor the floor. So, Lady Larimar, it might be hard for you to believe this, but you were in a coma for 4 years. It's not so hard to believe, Taiwan says, smiling a bit. I mean, it would explain why I look like a girl and my hair is so long. The silence was abysmal. The doctor stared at her. The Count did too. And the servants looked like they wanted to laugh at her reply. And poor Jaewon wanted the metaphorical hole to open up for real this time so she could jump in. Yes, you're right. The doctor agrees, caught off guard by the comical reply. Lady Larimar, do you remember how you ended up like that? Jaewon pauses and tries thinking. She can still recall how in the novel, Larimar's accident is a total mystery for both the reader and the characters in the story. All the explanation anyone got was a simple passage. Nobody knew who did it, but people suspected she had been pushed down by one of the victims of her bullying. And that's it. End quote. I'm sorry, I'm not too sure. I just fell down the stairs, correct? Chevon says, feeling sleepish for not giving the adults in the room a proper answer. The doctor patted her head, clearly worried but kept a happy face. That's all right, Lady Larimar. What's important is that you're feeling better. So let's finish the examination so you can rest, alright? Taiwan didn't speak much after that, only replied when asked about how she felt as the examination continued. The doctor checked everything to make sure things were in working order, before getting up and leaving Taiwan to rest. She got lowered down by the maids as they took the excess pillows from behind her. Count Gael and the doctor would leave the room, but not before he spoke again through the conch. Good night, he says, his words showing a sincere care for his daughter. Taiwan stared at the large man leave. Then it hit her that she had something to ask of him before that. She tried to grab his arm and clumsily missed that arm, only to accidentally launch herself sideways, and in an attempt to not fall flat on her face, she grabs the long cape he was wearing. She still fell, but not on her face. The maids and butlers stay frozen in place, as they have failed to catch their lady in time. Meanwhile, their lord was being choked by the sudden weight on his cape. Still, the man remained somewhat composed as he held back a grimace. Sorry, but I have a request, Chae-won says. Yes? The conch spoke softly, while Gal was getting choked. I'd like a haircut. My head feels really heavy with all this hair, she says. Chae-won then felt embarrassed. She realized that was a strange request, not just coming from someone who woke up from a coma, but because this world's women were expected to keep their hair long. But instead of being met with strange looks or flat out denial, the count turned around and gently picked up his daughter from the floor and put her back in bed. I'll call you a hairdresser, but first, rest for now. Understood? He said firmly. Understood, sir, she says. And with just that, he leaves the room, closing the door behind him. Chae-won is once again put under the covers, but while everyone hoped she would go to sleep, her eyes got stuck on the ceiling. She had questions, too many to think of, and some felt like images, concepts. She thought of her previous life. Was she taken to the hospital despite her immediate death? Was the school called? Or her parents called? Then she wondered if she died with her entire body in one piece, or if they did have to pick her remains off the street. She kind of hoped that she died in a single piece, or at least that she didn't look like a jigsaw puzzle. She also thought of her small rock collection. Then she suddenly remembered the shiny rock she saw in a grassy spot that she would always pass by. She had told herself that she'd pick it up later after school, as to avoid getting mocked by some classmates that were passing by. She hoped that the rock was small enough to not make her mom mad. Then she remembered her parents again. What were they doing now? What about her brother? She clenched the blanket out of her. The thoughts chew her out, so she kept going around in circles thinking, what are... But before she knew it, she fell asleep. And with that, we have the end of chapter 1.